All right, everybody. So we just finished up the Mayas last week. We had our Aztec walkthrough this week on Monday. So we're going to go through the Aztecs fairly quickly and get to our Inca, our last thing that we're going to learn about this year. So we're still in the same place. We're still in America, Latin America, which is Mexico area. And we're on part 2, which is the Aztecs. Our essential question for today, what we're going to answer by the end, is where they built their empire and how they adapted it to make it work for them, and a little bit about their culture and things like that. As always, if you want to take notes, you can. You don't have to. However, if you do, anything in yellow, make sure you write in your own words. Anything in red, copy down exactly. Anything in green, you do not have to write down at all. So the things you see around you are Aztec art and what happened to them and their cities and some of their religion and things that we're going to talk about today. And there is a skeleton there that we'll talk about with their religion.
It is a story wrapped in myth and legend. How did a tribe of wandering nomads engineer the America's greatest empire in just 200 years?
They had to devise engineering systems which were extraordinary for their age.
Their civilization rivaled Rome in its sophistication.
The Aztecs had the best technology that could be produced in the conditions of which they lived.
Aqueducts, palaces, pyramids, and temples stood as a tribute to their gods and a testament to the power of humankind. The Aztecs' crowning achievement was a gleaming capital city that astonished European explorers called the Venice of the New World.
The city spread out, glittering against its canals and its lake, bedecked with fine trees and beautiful mansions.
Their thirst for power and blood set them on a course for destruction. When it finally came, their annihilation would be swifter and more complete than the world had ever known.
So that was a little bit about the Aztecs and like an introduction to what we're going to learn about. So the Aztecs, like most people, had legends to explain their origins. This here is the legend that I'll read about how they came to live on an island. So these people were nomadic at first. They were moving from place to place, as we learned about what nomads are this year, according to where the food source was. Eventually, they gained religion and all that kind of stuff. And it was in this religion that they found out where they needed to settle. So here's the story. While they were living in the swamp, the Aztec priests received a vision. In this vision, the Aztec god Huitzilopochtli, I think is how you say it, told them to look for a place to settle where they saw an eagle perched on a cactus eating a snake. The Aztecs found this sign on a small reed-covered island in the middle of a shallow lake. There they started building their capital city of Tenochtitlan in 1325. Now, if anybody has ever seen the three Caballeros, I think it's what it's called. It's a Disney movie. It explains this legend a little bit more in detail. I did not put it in here, even though I could have, just because I haven't updated it yet. But next year I probably will. But what really happened for them to be in the area that they became to know? So that's just one story to make it sound like where they wanted to live. The truth is that none of the other tribes wanted the Aztecs to settle near them because they were super, super violent, which we'll talk about later. This next video will explain it better than I could, so pay attention because it's pretty crazy.
1325 AD, central Mexico, near modern-day Mexico City. A young girl, just a teenager, is celebrating her impending wedding. She is the daughter of a tribal king, and she is about to join a new tribe that has been a guest of her kingdom. That tribe is now known as the Aztecs. As part of the ritual, 5 Aztec noblemen lead her to an ancient temple for the ceremony. But as she reaches the top, the noblemen suddenly veer her away from the altar and onto a slab of stone in front of the temple, one used for sacrifice. Each man holds a limb, while a 5th lifts an obsidian knife high in the air. With one searing move, he slashes it through her chest and extracts her still beating heart. That evening, the king is invited to a ceremony to celebrate the marriage. Instead, he finds a priest performing a dance, wearing the still glistening skin of his daughter. As part of the ritual, the Aztecs had flayed her to honor the god of fertility.
He saw this and was absolutely horrified at what he saw, his dear daughter. And so he and his forces immediately chased the Aztecs into the lake and onto this island where they sought refuge.
The marshy island was an unwelcoming place. Yet it was from here that the Aztecs would beat the odds against them and forge the most powerful empire of the Americas.
So, as you can see, very, very violent people. I mean, they're taking out hearts and skinning people and whatnot, and it's all like, to marriage the tribes and stuff. So that's why they were, kicked out, because they were super violent, and they were chased to this island. Is probably what really happened. But let's learn a little bit more about this strange tribe called the Aztecs, and we're going to start with geography. This map shows the 3 tribes of the Americas. You should already know that the green is the Maya, and this red right there, that's where modern day Mexico is. That's where the Aztecs were located. Woohoo! And we're going to do a brain stack here. I didn't put the music in, but here comes the little guy. So, this brain stack is called In the Clouds. If you want to do it, you can do it. It's kind of helps you remember a lot of the geography. So shown here is the Aztec Empire. I want you to think of it as a cloud in the sky, like we've done before. What do you think it looks like? I'll tell you what I think it looks like, and you don't have to write this down. You could, do whatever with it. I think it looks like a frog or a squished frog. Personally, I've heard other people say it looks like an elf riding a snowmobile or some type of thing. So there's a couple of things that I've seen it or heard it been described as. So the Aztecs built their capital on a lake, and they called it Tenochtitlan. Now, on this lake, they built up. How they did this is they built up the mud from the sand and built it up so they could make an island right here. And that's what the main building and the top was. That's their temple, which means religion, super important. And then they, around it, built kind of the same thing and then had like canals, as you can see, the water in between. Instead of like roads or sidewalks or anything, they would use boats to kind of travel between the two places and the places that they needed to get to. So it was basically like Venice, which doesn't have any roads or walkways or anything like that. They actually have like the ocean as canals so they can, use their boats to get there. So it's very, very technologically advanced. But they built it on this small island that they made in the middle of the lake in Mexico. And then they built outward from that, made little islands, similar process to grow their crops and things like that we'll talk about in a second. And they had the canals that connected everything. So let's talk about their technology now that we know where they're located. The island that they settled on was not big enough to support a growing population. It did not have enough farmland for everyone to live there. So the Aztecs made their own land called Chinampas. Chinampas literally is like a Hispanic word, a Spanish word, meaning floating gardens. Using rows of trees as walls, they would make rectangular plots of land in the lake. They would then fill them up with mud, and they would put reeds and grass to hold it together. They would end up with a floating garden. Oops, sorry. So again, they didn't have enough land. They would literally take the dirt slash mud from the bottom of the lake and add it to their land. They would build walls, like I see here, take the water out of it, build up the mud from the other side, as so, and then they would have enough land to grow their crops on. And there it goes. There you go. So that is their adaptation, is that the Chinampas were these floating gardens that were made to expand their land that they didn't have a lot of. So very, very smart. Here's a video that shows a little bit about that.
An army marches on its stomach, so said Napoleon. Now, an ample food supply for civilians is a no-brainer in the critical development of any civilization. But the Aztecs perfected a unique method, not only to provide a substantial food supply for its civilian populace, but to fuel the military expansion of its empire.
This revolutionary engineering was called Chinampas, a system that allowed them to literally create new land to farm and to live on.
If you're going to have a city of any size, you have to provide room for them. And so what they did was build up these Chinampas in the lake bed.
Basically, a Chinampa is an artificial island built in the lake.
They look like narrow football fields, about 300 feet long by about 30 feet wide. A Chinampa was built by weaving a web of sticks floating in the water and piling reeds on top of them. Mud was then scraped from the lake bottom and piled atop the reeds to form the Chinampa. It took 4 to 6 men 8 days to build the average Chinampa. They were connected to the city by massive navigational canals that would take thousands of men months to build.
A Chinampa like this one could produce up to 7 crops a year, whereas a farm on the mainland could yield 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 at the most. As a crop was ready to harvest on a Chinampa, seedlings from another would be sprouting out of mud that would be spread on a boat adjacent to the Chinampa. Then when the seedlings were ready, they'd be transported to Chinampa, and this cycle would be repeated over and over and over again on hundreds and then thousands of Chinampas. Now, it was this technology that transformed Tenochtitlan from just another tribal town in the 14th century to a dominant and thriving city-state.
So there you go. There's a little bit more about the Chinampas. So we have another brain snack. There you go. There's a piano guy. So this is just a quick check that you're paying attention. So did the Aztecs build their civilization in the jungle? Hopefully you all disagreed. So let's press it. Yay, we win. So good job. If you didn't, make sure you review that. Remember, the jungle was the Maya. So we've already seen a bunch of stuff about the Aztecs, where they lived, what their technology was like, how they adapted. But this is probably the most interesting part that you'll enjoy. It's their religion and the things that they did. So it seems that the Aztecs could really do anything in the name of their religion. They built it around war and large sacrifices. Usually the sacrifices were enemies of the warrior and tribes that they were fighting against, and they said that they were doing it for pleasing the gods. So that's why I mean they really could do anything in the name of their religion. They usually pulled out their hearts out of the enemy, just like we saw a little bit earlier with the fake heart, of course, in the reenactment. But they took out the hearts and then sacrificed these people. So if you see on the picture behind you, there's a little ramp thing in the middle of the temple. They did this all in the largest temple, by the way. Temple of the Sun is what it's called. And they would do the little sacrifice, and then they would take the body and like literally just put it all the way down that little ramp, and then people would just take care of it afterward. So again, war and religion went together. In order to succeed in war, they had to have their religion and their gods kind of dealt with. They went to war, captured enemy soldiers. They would become slaves, also to be sacrificed. It was a lot bloodier than the Maya. The Mayas really didn't do a whole lot of human sacrifices. The Aztecs were very much into human sacrifices, so that's what kind of the difference between Maya and the Aztec were. Here's a picture of this. There's the little the body at the top, and then there's a body at the bottom down there. That's the little ramp I was talking about where the blood is on the side. So basically, this is kind of a thing that I found. The Aztec history says that during one of these religious human sacrifice ceremonies, 20,000 people were sacrificed in 4 days. While this may have been possible, 5,000 people a day in 4 days, it is probably exaggerated. They wanted to scare people. They wanted to win and intimidate the other enemies so they wouldn't have to fight them and they would just surrender to them. That was kind of the point of the whole entire thing. Either way, sacrifices, especially human sacrifices, were common for the Aztecs. Now, they did have the same ball game as the Maya, the Pocatoc. And there's one of the stadiums in the back. Again, the ball game, it's tied to the religion as well. Legend says that the gods fought for control of man, at least according to the Aztecs, by playing the game. And the losers and sometimes the winners also would be sacrificed. Woohoo! Now, one more brain stack. This is the assignment that you will be doing. I just put the normal guy in there, the football player. So we done this last time on a scratch piece of paper, half a sheet if you want to. Write 3 review questions about or from the notes on the Aztecs, and then answer those questions using the notes, and then send them to me either on Teams or using OneNote, or send them to me in Remind or email. Okay, and that is all you have to do. So should be easy.